Hey, it's Conrad Thompson from SaveWithConrad.com. Heads up, homeowners, all of a sudden your house is worth more than ever these last few years. But what are we going to do with that newfound equity? No, I'm not suggesting you sell your house and go buy something else. But didn't we all make this decision when we bought a house where we said, hey, someday we'd like to, and one day it would be nice if, maybe it's the dream kitchen, maybe it's an in-ground pool, maybe it's a man cave. But you've got this newfound equity, and I think we should use some of that equity to turn your house into your dream home with no money out of pocket. But even better than that, we're routinely helping folks do this, and they wind up with a cheaper monthly payment. So if you got the dream house you always wanted, with no money out of pocket, and your payments went down, how easy is that? Find out how easy it is to turn your house into your dream home with no money out of pocket right now at SaveWithConrad.com. We can't wait to hear about your projects. Tell us what your dream is. We're going to help you make it happen at SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Woo!
What's going on, everyone? It's time for another edition of Strictly Business with Eric Bischoff right here on the Podcast Heat and Ad Free Shows Network. I am Jon Alba, and yes, you're not here to listen to me. You're listening to the man with those beautiful, fantastic dimples, a lovely sweater in this late October afternoon. He's Mr. Eric Bischoff. What's going on, my brother?
Man, it's been a fun week. It's been a cold week. Last week it was 70 degrees and sunny. Leaves are turning. I'm out, messing with my dog in a t-shirt and kicking back. And Wednesday morning I woke up and it was 11 degrees out and snowing. And it stopped snowing last night. So we've got a nice, probably 2-3 inches of snow and typical winter weather here in Wyoming. Loving it.
Man, I remember when I lived in Bangor, Maine. There was one year where from December 15th to January 15th, the high never got above 1 degree. And I was just saying to myself, I don't know if I could do this forever, but it seems like that seasonal change and that deep winter weather, you're good with that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about where I live is they jokingly refer to this part of the Rocky Mountains as the Banana Belt. And it's a small area, again, right around where I live, that we get snow, but not a lot. It'll get down to below zero for 4 or 5 days, and it'll go up to 50 degrees for 3 or 4 days. So it's not that straight, solid, not like Minnesota. Man, Minnesota gets cold in November and it doesn't warm up till June. Mm-hmm. That's an exaggeration, probably till May. But
yeah,
it stays cold. It's gray. It's just winter throughout, for 4 or 5 months straight. Yep. Here you get ice cold, frigid temperatures, and then it feels like spring, and then it gets cold again, and it feels like spring. All the snow melts, and so it's not a solid, intense cold. It just comes and goes.
Yeah,
so, I dig it. And I love the seasons. It's hunting season here. I'm going to be doing some elk hunting next week, and I dig all that stuff. So.
That was another thing that always cracked me up when I lived in Maine, especially hunting season, moose hunting specifically. You have to be part of a lottery in order to moose hunt. And people would say you'd really hit the lottery if your car ended up hitting a moose and you were lucky enough to survive, because the first question out of the cop's mouth would be, do you want to keep it? And the concept of eating roadkill was something I had to wrap my head around, but it's apparently a pretty common thing. I don't know if it's like that by you, but...
yeah, we don't have any moose. I would imagine. I don't know what the laws are here. I would imagine you could claim an elk or a deer.
Yeah.
You hit a deer with a car is not really much to work with.
No.
Because you do a lot of damage when you hit a deer.
Yeah.
But a moose or an elk, and a moose can weigh 1,500, 1,800 pounds. So it just depends how hard you hit it and where you hit it. But moose meat is fantastic. It is one of my favorite wild game choices, but it's hard to come by.
They used to tell me, you get one moose, you're walking home with 400 to 500 pounds of meat for the winter. And I was like, man, kudos to those of you who are able to be lucky enough to step away with something like that. But I love it. I get to ask you about stuff like this, Eric Bischoff, because that is one of the true beauties of the Ad-Free Shows network here. And if you sign up now at adfreeshows.com, you'll get access to a ton of bonus content, including our Ask Conrad series, and you'll get questions and answers much like this.
Dylan Leahy says there have been two wrestling booms in WWE's history, the Golden Era and the Attitude Era. And Conrad's opinion, or are we going to look back at this current period of wrestling as the third big boom and really wrestling as a whole? Yes, we're in it right now. We're in the biggest boom of all right now. And I know that people would argue that and say less people are watching. That doesn't matter. What matters is how much money's coming in. And they're more profitable doing bigger numbers than ever before right now. We're in the boom right now.
We've got series with Kevin Sullivan, with Mike Chioda, Nick Patrick, and so many more over on adfreeshows.com. So make sure you head on over there and subscribe now for bonus content like that and early access to podcasts, much like Strictly Business with Eric Bischoff. Eric, we are going to talk about plenty of good current stuff going on. We're going to talk about this potential Endeavor move to a private company. We're going to talk about WWE announcing their big premium live event in Berlin. We'll talk about Sting, but we have an interesting interview to kick things off on this particular episode of Strictly Business. What can people look forward to in just a couple seconds here, Eric?
I was so impressed. I did the interview yesterday with Adi Shankar, and Diamond Dallas Page reached out to me, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and said, "Hey, you're going to love this guy, Adi. I really think you should have him on Strictly Business. He's an amazing guy, and he's got this new animated series. It's an adult animated series on Netflix." And I said, "Sure, man, anything to help a brother out." I didn't know what to anticipate really. And then I did a little bit of research on Adi. He's the youngest producer ever to have a North American box office hit. We're going to talk about that in the interview. Young guy, extremely talented guy. And trust me when I tell you, you are going to be hearing a lot about Adi in the future. He is, I think, going to be one of the bigger names in entertainment, and fascinating. And I got a chance to watch episode 1 of his series. And again, we're going to talk a lot about that in the interview, and I want to give it away here, but really, really impressive wrestling fan. It's kind of one of the things that got him interested in entertainment, which I thought was really cool. But I think you're going to dig it.
I love when we find good tie-ins like that. The people who are in the periphery of pro wrestling who utilize some of the elements they've learned over the years to harness that and use it effectively in their respective line of work. So without further ado, it's time now to cue up Eric Bischoff's interview with Adi Shankar.
All right. Thanks, John. And joining me now, I've been looking forward to doing this interview for at least a week or so now. I heard from Diamond Dallas Page about this amazing producer, actor, writer, director, entrepreneur, and wrestling fan by the name of Adi Shankar, who is, by the way, the youngest producer ever to have a #1 box office film in North America. His name, the title of the show or the movie is The Gray, featuring starring Liam Neeson. So that's kind of a big deal. Adi, thanks for joining us here on Strictly Business, man.
Eric, thank you, man. This is such an honor to be on here with you. For me, this is insane. So I'm freaking out on the inside.
Well, don't freak out.
Yeah.
It's really not that big a deal. It's a
bad
bigger
freak
deal
out.
for me than it is for you. So thank you. And I hope you feel the same way when it's over, by the way. So Adi, before we get
the story about like meeting your heroes, like you don't ever meet your heroes. So I'm kind of in meeting the hero mode right now. So
well, I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about your new series. It was released on Netflix October 19th, Captain Laserhawk. But before we get into that, I want to learn a little bit more about you and let our audience learn a little bit more about you. Let's go back to day one, man. Where are you from and what's your interest in professional wrestling?
So I was born in India, in Calcutta. And then we moved to South India, Madras. Then we moved to Mumbai. Then we moved to Hong Kong. And then it was like Singapore. My family's in the Middle East now. And I immigrated to America by myself when I was 15. It was 15,
Wow.
like 2 days before 9/11 happened. So that was paradigm shift. Moved to Rhode Island. So I had this kind of cross-cultural, multinational background, so to speak, and yeah, so I guess my interest in professional wrestling, I guess the best way I can characterize it is I came from these pretty rigid societies that were, I don't want to say they were homogenous because that's wrong. That's too extreme of a word, right? But there were a lot of rules where I've lived, like India. Yeah. So, but then wrestling was awesome for me because all of a sudden now you're seeing like this counterculture, almost like rebellion happening, right? So like it was actually a paradigm, like a complete paradigm shift for me. So, my first exposure to this was Stone Cold, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And then obviously your work with the NWO, I was like, whoa, this is really cool. I haven't experienced anything like this before. This is awesome. Yeah, so, I was just a fan, and I wanted to get into entertainment. I didn't really know how, because there really wasn't, pre-social media, in that era, there wasn't a lot of information on how media worked and whatnot. But actually, thanks to you, Eric, there was a lot of information on how wrestling worked. So, or kind of the behind the scenes machinations of the wrestling ecosystem and how that worked. So I was just soaking in information. And also the other thing that was really cool was the audience feedback aspect. I felt like I really understood America watching wrestling, where a performer would come out and then you're seeing like, oh wow, okay. So I was able to like spot trends, I guess before they became mainstream, because you're like, oh, this person is, this character's coming out and they're behaving this way. And so I got this kind of preview of the forks in the road of culture.
That's really interesting, and we'll get into the reasons why, because I did have a chance this morning, actually, early this morning, which was really interesting for me because I'm not a morning person. I mean, I get up early and I have this process that I go through. It starts about 5 a.m. and it starts out mainly with a cup of coffee. And I thought, man, I better sit down and watch episode 1 of this new series before this interview. And of course, it was pretty early in the morning, and it's just like, bam! I mean, it was pretty cool. It was a shocker at 5:30 this morning, and there's a lot of kind of previews of culture going on, at least in that first episode. I don't know what the next 4 or 5 look like, but I was kind of overwhelmed. But I want to go back to what you said a few moments ago. You wanted to break into the entertainment business. You didn't really know how. You came from another series of countries and cultures and backgrounds. And you decided, I'm going to break into the entertainment business, which was no easy feat for people that have gone to film school and have interned at, entertainment agencies and companies. What was your first breakthrough? How did you first plant your flag in entertainment?
I mean, it wasn't like one breakthrough, so to speak, right? It was more a series of random back doors that I found. Again, I want to point out, and I'm not just saying this because it's a podcast with you. And you're a pivotal figure in the lineage of wrestling, but actually, I figured out that I had to use back doors because of wrestling, right? How does Jericho get over with the audience? Okay, so he's not being pushed. Okay, so find a back door, right? Get in front of people. So it was really a series of back doors. I would say maybe the first one is, and and this sounds ridiculous now, I met Daniel Stern. So if you recall Home Alone, the Home Alone franchise, there was like the two bandits. There was the Joe Pesci bandit, and there was Daniel Stern, who's the taller bandit. I met him through a friend of a friend, and he agreed to have lunch with me and sent me a script. And I literally thought I made it. Because at this point, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. Dude, so I'd say that was maybe my first. And that wasn't even a break, right? But to me, at least, that was like, oh, this is possible. Like, there are people who actually do this, and one of them talked to me.
How old were you at that time?
22.
See, what I love about that part of your story is, I do conventions, I do meet and greets, and oftentimes I do Q&As, even here on this podcast or others. And one question that I get almost every time I'm out in public and doing something in public is, how do you break into professional wrestling? And the answer is, there's no one answer. There's a million answers. There's no template. There's no formula. There's no book. There's nothing you can study. It's just going out there and being in the right place at the right time and having the passion and the desire. And I think this should be inspirational to a lot of people that are listening to this, that may have an interest in professional wrestling and want to get into it, or any other form of entertainment. There is no single simple answer. It's just being in the right place at the right time and being willing to kind of put yourself out there and having lunch with a friend of a friend of a friend's contact and reading a script. It's step one.
And honestly, I bombed that entire situation, right? Because he gave me the script to read, and I went ahead and rewrote it, and I sent it back to him, and he was like super pissed off. So, like, it wasn't. So it's not like that went very well, right? Like,
I love it.
And he's like, "You rewrote my script?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I just made it better, dude. Sorry, that's not how this works. I'm sorry." And at the time, I was working at. Do you know the Discover credit card?
Sure.
So I was working. I'd graduated from college. I went to Northwestern University, and I had an idea when I was at Northwestern. And again, this sounds ridiculous now in the world of social media, right? But this is pre-social media. So if you're Coke, Nike, or GE, you go to one of the big ad agencies, Foot Cone Belding, Saatchi & Saatchi, Draft FC, one of the big guys. But if you were a mom and pop shop, you had literally no one to go to. Like, who was going to design your logo? Who was going to give you a marketing strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Northwestern is housed in a suburb in outside of Chicago called Evanston. And I'm like, oh, all these businesses actually want to market. They want to market to Northwestern students. And I have access to the mailboxes, and I can flyer the campus. But I didn't want to just be a guy that was handing out flyers. So I went to a bunch of businesses in Evanston, and I was like, hey, let me run your marketing campaign. Let me basically be your ad agency. Can I do that? And then, basically make ads for you. And this turned into like a full not even mini ad, it turned into an ad agency. I know, obviously small scale, right? We were only dealing with mom and pop shops. So then I got hired by the Discover credit card. Actually, in between then, Northwestern had me teach a class on advertising and brand management when I was a senior, and I taught that for a whole year even after I graduated. So I was like teaching at the university that I was a student at, which was super, super weird. It was just so weird. It was just so weird. But again, it was like I found this kind of hole in the market because you have, and it wasn't just me in the ad agency, right? Because like Northwestern had so many kids who were working in advertising even a year or two out of college, right? They were working at the big ad agencies. In order to land those jobs, they were making spec ads, right? So they'd make a fake M&M's ad, a fake Volkswagen ad. And I'm like, dude, instead of making like a fake M&M's ad, let's go actually make a real marketing, make a real advertisement for this coffee shop down the street. And so then I ended up teaching I ended up teaching this, which was weird. Then I ended up working at a credit card company, because my parents were very, very strict, and they were like, hey, you have to work in like finance, and you have to work for a proper company, or else you have to come back home. So I was actually fighting, I was like trying to stay in America because it felt like there was just endless possibilities here. It felt not quite like the Wild Wild West. That's an extreme, that's an exaggeration, but it felt like an ecosystem celebrated risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the time, we were living in Singapore, and there the ecosystem felt like it was driven by a fear of failure. And I'm like, whoa, like I can't go back there. That's basically going to, be a fate worse than death, which sounds extreme right now. And actually, as I said that out of my mouth, I'm just like, dude, that's insane. But I actually believe that at the core of my being. I was like, oh my God, this is the fate worse than death. And so, but I was working at the credit card company, and I hated it there. I literally, dude, I hated it there. I was like, this may be TMI, but I would, drive to work, and I'd be like thinking of like jumping off the garage. It was so awful. There was something about corporate life that was like soul sucking. Now, this was all a gift at the end of the day. It was all a gift because it put me in a spot where I had to make any creative endeavor work. Because I'm like, failure means I go back to Southeast Asia. How I dress gets picked for me. Who I marry gets picked for me. Like, it's going to be like, this is your future, and it's like, you will follow this. The pressure of the whole thing kind of forced me to rise to the occasion and make something happen.
Now, in your new series,
Mm-hmm.
you feature Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega.
Yes.
How and why Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes? Created characters for them, and Cody Rhodes' character is Cody Rhodes.
Yeah, it's actually Cody.
And you did a great job, by the way, for, I'm sure you're trying to reach a broad audience, but I'm guessing, I don't know a lot about your world and your business, but I'm guessing that the comic book audience and the wrestling audience, there's a great overlap there. I say that because I've been to a number of Comic Cons, the big ones, and when I'm surrounded by a bunch of cosplay, comic book animation, fans, I'd walk through to go grab a Pepsi or hot dog or whatever. And, I was shocked at how many people recognized me. I wouldn't have anticipated that. So I would imagine the crossover is pretty significant.
Huge.
But you did such a great job because right in the, in the opening couple minutes of episode 1, we see Cody Rhodes. We identify Cody Rhodes as a character. I think he's got a match coming up later or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you hooked that wrestling audience. And then we see Cody as a character later on. And of course, at the end of the first episode, I'm not going to give it away, but hell of a finish, brother. Hell of a finish at the end of episode 1. Man, I loved it. But again, why Cody? Why'd you pick Cody and Kenny?
I just liked them personally. So I'll address Kenny first, but before I jump into that, I 100,000% agree with you that there's massive crossover between the wrestling audience, the comic book audience, and the video game audience now, and the anime audience. So I feel like there's a cross-pollination that has been happening. That is the norm. I think especially for my generation and younger. Yeah, if you liked wrestling, then you played the video games, and then at the end of the day, like the Undertaker is kind of a character, like he's like a Marvel comic books character, right? So he's a Marvel character. So tons of overlap, not just in audience, but I would also say like thematically and creatively. Yeah, I mean, I knew Kenny and Cody personally. I actually met Cody through DDP, same way Diamond Dallas Page, same way you and I met. Dallas actually introduced me to Cody right after All In had blown up, and he was like, so he set up a dinner for us. And Cody was in a spot where he was trying to figure out next steps. He'd had an offer from Tony Khan to create effectively what ended up becoming AEW. There was a conversation with World Wrestling Entertainment, and you know how Dallas is, right? He's like, he's a connector. He's just a sweet guy. He's a connector, and he can kind of. And he was like, Adi, you've got this, great relationship with Netflix. You've delivered them a freaking hit show, and you clearly like wrestling and know something about wrestling. Why don't you take these guys and say, hey, let's do a wrestling show? And it was kind of through that process that I didn't end up doing, by the way. I didn't end up doing that. But I got to know Cody through that, just through that. And I had a lot of respect for him. Just as just the way he shows up in the world,
He's a classy guy, and he's
a classy guy. Yeah, he's
great representation of the industry for sure.
1000%. And then he was in LA. He came over to see me. He was just asking some questions about some stuff. So he came over to meet me, and my mom happened to be here. And my mom was like, "You should be friends with guys like that. He's a great guy." And I met Kenny in a different context. That was through mutual love of gaming. His agent Barry Bloom introduced us. So I wanted wrestling, and it's more than wanted. I needed wrestling to have representation in the world of Captain Laserhawk, right? Because at the end of the day, the show is an ode and homage, a love letter to everything that I loved as a child and as a young adult, and really still love. So I was like, okay, wrestling has to have some sort of representation, right? And in episode 3, that's the episode Kenny Omega appears in. There is. Have you ever seen the movie They Live?
Sure.
So obviously starred Roddy Piper. John Carpenter directed the film. Would you be able to explain the 2-sentence plot synopsis of They Live?
Oh God, I'd probably butcher it myself, but basically it's a kind of an apocalyptic environment that Roddy finds himself in and has to fight his way out of, I guess. If I was in a 2-story building in an elevator, that'd be my pitch.
Conceptually, totally, but it's an apocalyptic world where people don't really realize it's an apocalyptic world. And he finds a pair of sunglasses, and when he puts on the sunglasses and he looks at the world, all of a sudden, like a billboard for I don't know, some for like a commercial for beer, all of a sudden it's no longer there and it says obey. And he starts, he looks at the TV, and the news anchors are not actual humans. They look like aliens. He'll walk down the street some more, and you'll see like a bus ad. And again, he puts on the glasses, the bus ad is not there, and it says consume. And so effectively what these sunglasses are doing is they are removing the programming that the aliens have created.
Let's segue, because that's a good segue into the premise of Captain Laserhawk. Because when I saw it this morning, well, let's just go before I get to that, because I don't want to jump it. But what is the premise of Captain Laserhawk? What is that world? And just explain that to us.
It's an alternate timeline. So in this universe, automation happened in the 1950s, and this wasn't the automation as we know it today, it was if there's a animated movie called Iron Giant. So it's Iron Giant style automation.
Mhm.
And then because of it, immediately there's mass unemployment, right? There's just mass unemployment everywhere. So the biggest tech company of the time period steps in and says, okay, well, you know what? We'll provide universal basic income. So by that we mean that anybody who is a citizen of America gets money every month. Everyone's happy. They're like, okay, cool. This corporation like solved our big financial problem, which is great.
Kind of like Meta, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
kind of like Meta, kind of like Amazon, all these, yeah. And then we cut to a few years later, and then they go, okay, look, everyone gets credits, the free money, but if you spend it at our stores, they're worth double.
kind of like Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum.
I don't know. and then then they start exerting social controls. Like, okay, look, we have a one-child policy, but look, you just get extra credits for agreeing to not have extra kids, so on and so forth. And then we cut to the 90s, and it is a complete fascist dystopian hellscape. And by the way, America is no longer America. It has now been called Eden. Eden is the tech company. So the tech company now has rebranded America as just the tech company.
Honestly, yeah. Adi, and I'm glad you made those comparisons, because I was a little hesitant to, because I don't like to get political or too social. This is all about the wrestling business after all. But I was like, whoa, Adi is like the George Orwell of animation. I mean, so many things that I saw inside of that first episode, just as you pointed out, universal basic income, big social media company kind of taking over the world and creating a new country called Eden, and social credit scores. And it's like, holy crap. It was very, because when Dallas first called me, he said, "No, Adi's, told me all the great things you've done. And, you had this new animated series coming in." I'm thinking, animated series. It's an adult it's a very adult animated series, by the way. So this is not Scooby-Doo by any stretch of the imagination. But I was like, man, I'm going to have a hard time relating to that. But 2 minutes in, and I'm going, whoa, this is like a little nod to not only what's going on now, but what could go on in the future if things don't kind of get under control.
100%.
Pretty scary.
100%. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's I'm dissecting the dangers of mass surveillance, the monopolization of the American dream by large tech corporations, and really just how our relentless pursuit of fucking comfort will lead us into an apocalyptic nightmare.
Attention, all sporting enthusiasts and ball game aficionados. It's that magical time of the year when football is in full swing. Basketball is back. The baseball postseason has us on the edge of our seats. But speaking of ball games, it's time to talk about the champion of the grooming game. That's right. Manscaped has just launched the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. It's like having a sixth man on your team, ensuring you stay smooth no matter what sport you're into. So don't strike out on this offer. Head over to manscaped.com and use code WrestleBiz to get 20% off and free shipping. Trust us with the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. You will be the real MVP, both on and off the field. I'll tell you, this happened just 2 weeks ago. I was in the shower. I was trying to take care of my business. And my Performance Package, it was nestled underneath the sink. I had forgot to take it out the lawnmower 4.0 that I had. And as a result, I didn't have a good time. Thankfully, I don't got to worry about that anymore, because the Lawnmower 5.0 uses 2 enhanced skin-safe blade heads. First, a head with an upgraded trimmer to get your grass in playing condition, then a dual foil blade head for top-notch smoothness. We all know football is a game of inches, but Manscaped knows grooming is a game of millimeters. And with advanced grooming tools like the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, you can tackle any hairy situation and come out looking like an MVP. Also inside the bundle made for balls features the new Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Soother toner, and 2 free gift. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code WrestleBiz at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code WrestleBiz. We got balls and beard trimmers, but mostly balls.
Man, that's a great way of saying it, and I feel much better. I was going to tiptoe around that because I didn't want to offend you. You know, I mean, people react to things different ways, but that is such a clean, clear-cut way of summarizing the premise of this series.
And the other thing is, I'm not like I wanted this series to exist in a world of within shades of gray, right? Because I didn't want this thing to be a propaganda piece against any one group or any one social. so I wanted to create a narrative that mirrors one's biases. Like, so, it'll mirror your own biases when you're watching it, while warning you of the perils of radicalization. Right. So, as an example of this, universal basic income. I'm literally not saying, oh my God, universal basic income is bad. It's bad. Like, we got to watch out for it. Again, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's not good. It's not evil. But but there is danger if it's applied without proper guardrails. Because when you even look at this financial model of universal basic income, like, I'm not critiquing universal basic income as much as I'm critiquing how this financial apparatus can be used to further enslave humanity.
And that's one of the things that I think is going to make this thing ahead. Like I said, I don't think I'm overstating it when I say you could be the George Orwell of animation. But let's go back. The action is great. The animation is really, really impressive. Now, I'm not a connoisseur, I have to admit that, but I was taken aback at, number one, the dialogue, your actors, the people that did the voiceovers, which includes you, by the way. Which character did you voice over, by the way?
The evil red Power Ranger.
Oh, dude, you were evil.
Yeah,
dude, good job.
Lickers.
But the actors, the voiceover work was really, really well done, as well as the editing. I was amazed at the amount of editing that went into this. It was almost done like a feature film.
For sure. It was, the animation studio that I worked with to execute the screenplays. They're this awesome, and I call them a tribe of renegade pirates. They are. It's a French animation studio called Bobby Pills. And Eric, they are, it felt like yes and. It just felt like yes and, right? Anything I was throwing at them, they found a way to make it even better, even more crazy. So the animation feels super fluid, but I feel like also what you're responding to is you can feel the passion that was poured into every hand-drawn drawing.
And that's the part that's so impressive to me, because, I just saw, I went to, my wife and I and my daughter went to see Killers of the Flower Moon last night, which really amazing story. And it's a true story, and Leonardo DiCaprio did, if he doesn't get an Academy Award for that performance, I don't know who will. But so much of the emotion that is created in a feature film is created here in facial expressions, and they're subtle, and they create emotion, they emote, and it connects to the audience, which is a lot harder to do, I would guess, in animation. But in your series, and that's one of the things that hooked me right away, is I'm feeling the same way about these characters. I noticed it consciously, but I'm sure in the beginning it was subconscious. The same way I would feel if I was watching a feature film, a non-animated feature film, in that it creates that emotional connection and it draws you in, even though you're watching animation. And we talk about, professional wrestling. It's always about suspension of disbelief. Yes, we all know it's scripted entertainment. Yes, we all know what's going to happen, or that everybody else knows what's going to happen in the ring, blah, 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 blah. But it's the ability of the performers in the ring to give you permission to forget that you're watching professional wrestling and whatever biases you may have about it.
For sure.
Get sucked into the story and the drama, but that's done based on the talent's ability to create that emotion and connect to the audience.
Yeah.
And you and your studio did an amazing job of doing that in an animated format. Hats off to you and the entire team, man.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much. The idea was to find a way to showcase real, authentic chemistry between characters, even though they're cartoons.
How's it been received so far by Netflix?
Oh, great. I mean, these are the best reviews I've ever gotten just of my career. Yeah, everyone's digging it. I became kind of a crackhead on Twitter. Because you don't want to like read any of this stuff and everything, but like someone sent me a link. The next thing I know, I'm on like Twitter reading the awesome things people have to say about the show on Twitter, and then your dopamine receptors get completely fried. So there's a come down from that. But yeah, it's been, dude, I'm just so grateful, man. Like, I'm so grateful that I got to do this.
What's next for you, man?
And the other thing, Eric, I just should point out is, this is effectively an original world, right? It's an original universe, but it's actually populated with some of the biggest characters in video games ever. Characters from Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Splinter Cell, even the chief propaganda officer of the fascist dystopian hellscape is a cartoon character. It's this dude Rayman, who was the mascot for Ubisoft, which is like the 5th largest gaming conglomerate in the world. They like literally let me use their mascot in a R-rated way. So again, super great.
That had to be a challenge, right? I mean, you want to take the brand?
No, it was nuts because I just, I used to draw these fan films on YouTube like back in the day. So I would, do a hard R take on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, or a hard R take on, where the Power Rangers are effectively child soldiers being weaponized by aliens to fight an intergalactic war that they have no stake in, or a hard R take on Pokemon, where you're like, hey, this is effectively illegal animal fighting. Like, what are we doing? So I had this kind of track record of doing subversive takes on popular IP, but those were all unauthorized and unofficial. So Ubisoft just let me do that with all their brands, and you're like, yeah, that should have been very difficult, and it like literally wasn't. One of the one of the heads of Ubisoft sat down with me and he's like, okay, we're going to let you do this, and we're going to clear the runway for you to do it. I'm like,
man, that's a lottery ticket right there. That's a lottery ticket, brother.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy, dude. So, and again, all gratitude, man. All just super grateful that this even exists. And it's weird to be living in a reality now that where it's out there and people have seen it and they're reacting to it and they're loving it. That's
and Ubisoft and Ubisoft is, I don't want to say a character, but it's a integral part of the story plot.
Yes.
They not only let you take their characters and have some creative fun with them, but you use their brand inside of the show as a part of the plot, which is I mean, that's corporately that shit doesn't happen, man.
That's like Disney saying, hey, why don't you give Mickey Mouse a Tommy gun? And have him
that's crazy.
It's literally the exact same thing. It was crazy, dude.
Listen, brother, we're going to wrap this up here, but before I do, first of all, thank you again. But secondly, and most importantly for this interview, what's next?
There is my next show that will come out is something called Devil May Cry. So, based on a popular video game that I loved during, I just love this game. And I'm making a series out of Devil May Cry.
Awesome.
For Netflix, with Netflix. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Adi, man,
It's like,
continued success.
Being a kid in the candy store with the stuff, right? Because it's like the things that I loved are now coming, and I get to like.
So, I got to ask. I mean, this interview could go on forever, but I got to ask you. So, how's mom and dad feeling now? They trying to get you back? Are they good with it? You don't work for a bank. You don't work for a big company. They feeling pretty good about things?
When I get good reviews, they feel very good. And that lasts for a little bit. And then all of a sudden the panic hits in. But like, but America's so crazy. Come back home. Yeah.
Well, it is a little crazy, but we're glad to have you, brother. And continued success, and I'm sure we're going to be talking again in the future. Adi, thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to this podcast, check it out. You've got to check that out. You're going to have it's on Netflix, and it's a 6-episode series, correct?
6, yeah. Season 1 is 6 episodes. Yeah.
Captain Laserhawk. Check it out. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. Adi, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you so much, Eric. It is such an honor, man. You're literally one of my heroes, and this is not lip service. Like, I kind of had an understanding of how media works just because you were so gracious with the amount of information you put out there, and just how like the corporate ecosystem that the corporate apparatus that governs what gets made and how it gets made. When you transitioned into reality television, just kind of how you talked about that process and put it out there. You were just so open about even things that didn't work out so well. And then, just being so introspective about what you would have done differently, man. Like, for people coming up, like, that is a freaking gold mine, dude. Of just knowledge, just to be able to dissect and hear someone who'd been at the top of the mountain for so long, just be so open and transparent without ego. Dude, it's a gift, man. So
thank you, brother, very much. And by the way, if you ever need like an elderly evil fucker in one of your animated things, I'm your guy.
Dude, done.
All right. I love it. Thank you, Adi.
Thank you.
I'll take a pause here real quick, Eric, just to remind everyone that this episode of Strictly Business is presented to you by Blue Chew. Let's talk about sex, gents. Remember the days when you're always ready to go? Now you can increase your performance, get that extra confidence in bed, and here's how you're going to do it. You're going to go to BlueChew.com. What is Blue Chew? It's a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises, and you never know when it's going to strike. The process is simple. Sign up now, BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you're going to receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the United States and prepared and shipped directly to your door in a discreet package. This stuff works so quickly. You chew it, you do it. It's going to take a matter of minutes. You could be missing out on the best sex of your life, and you wouldn't even know. You pop a Blue Chew, it's going to change your life. I got no doubt about that. I've seen it happen firsthand. With Blue Chew men everywhere, excited to see the postman, because when your package has arrived, your package has arrived as well. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. We got a special deal for our listeners as well. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code WrestleBiz at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. Promo code WrestleBiz, WrestleBiz, to receive your first month absolutely free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring Strictly Business. Wow, what an awesome interview that was, Eric. Totally out of the spectrum of the traditional pro wrestling podcast discourse you'd hear I really, really thought he was insightful, and I like that he's very forward thinking too. Any thoughts about the interview now that you kind of had a couple days to sit in it here?
Yeah, I can't overstate how just thoroughly impressed I am with Adi. You know, his series Captain Laserhawk. I watched the first episode. I'll be honest. You know, I was thought going into it, I was just doing a favor for a friend and helping him promote a TV series, which I'm happy to do. You know, but yeah, about halfway through the interview, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Captain Laserhawk, check it out. And I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but after sitting down and watching the first episode, I'm kind of hooked. You know, Adi opened up a whole new genre of entertainment because I would have never, ever, sampled,
Sure.
animation, an adult animation project. I never would have sampled it. And I'm so glad I did.
There's a lot of great animated programming out there, especially in the adult sphere. It really is amazing, Eric. I know this is kind of offbeat, but to think that a show like The Simpsons, which I feel like kind of laid the groundwork for
Mhm.
everything that we know as like adult animated programming, that it still exists today in its essential form as we've known it since 1989. Maybe it's not as attractive to viewers as it once was, but the fact that it was so far ahead of counterculture that it still exists and helped spur an entire movement and an entire genre. I think that's amazing, isn't it? That even as TV habits change, there still is a desire for something like that.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and again, I learned from Adi. Adi, he got his start, as you heard, basically coming up with a series where he essentially ripped off a bunch of video game characters and then kind of R-rated them and integrated them into an animated series, and now he's working with Ubisoft, which is one of the largest video game companies in the world, and they're allowing him to take their video game characters and kind of use them in these animated series, but in that kind of adult themed, more serious, as Adi said, it's kind of like Disney going, okay, Adi, here's our Mickey Mouse IP. Go ahead and put a machine gun in his hand. Let's see what you come up with. What Adi did was so incredibly outside the box. I hate to use that term, but he shattered every paradigm when it comes to how to engage characters and license those characters into a project. And as a result, he's got another big project, coming up next. And he's just a fascinating cat, man. He broke the mold for sure.
Let me ask you this. When WCW was at the height of its personality, I feel like, and I'm going to go back to this term here, counterculture was super, super relevant at that time. It's why the Monday Night Wars were fueled by the no limits element of the DX and NWO, etc. You're pushing everything that you had. South Park was enormous at that time. Celebrity Deathmatch. Were you guys ever approached about any integration or collaboration with any of those adult animated centric programs?
Not in terms of animation, of course. We were approached and participated in. Did the Jeff Foxworthy show. I did an episode on HBO. I can't remember the name of it. Oh my gosh, it was a hit show on HBO for a while. Sports Agent was the central character. It escapes me. I haven't had enough coffee. It's early in the morning. But yeah, we were approached for more traditional types of entertainment opportunities to bring some of our characters over, but nothing in the world of animation.
I asked that because if you recall, WWE had the affiliation with Celebrity Deathmatch at the time. It was huge. And it seems like that could have been an area where maybe there could have been some more crossover from either of the major companies or anything like that. So, just very interesting. Was it Arliss? Was that
Arliss was the show?
Arliss?
Yep. Arliss was the show. Did an episode of Arliss. Had fun with
Gotcha.
it. Got residual checks for several years from that show.
I know.
I go out to the mailbox and I see that check and I go, oh my gosh, I can't wait. I open it up, ran into the house, grabbed Mrs. B, jumped in a car, went into town, and had a Dairy Queen.
I was gonna say, was it $10?
With my $2 residual check.
Okay, $2. Okay, all right. Hey,
and they got progressively smaller from there.
Okay, well, it's something, I guess. All right, let's get into the business of the business here. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about NXT and AEW ratings. We talk about that here again out of the gate. 787,000 viewers for NXT overall. Once again, beating AEW Dynamite here, 774,000 viewers for Dynamite. So pretty close, all things considered, on different nights, Tuesday and Wednesday. The NBA, the big headliner this week, kicking off its season on Tuesday, and then Wednesday was the main slate of the first set of games across the league. NBA did massive numbers across the board, Eric, as you would expect with the season kicking off. Plus, Major League Baseball postseason, they had a couple of Game 7s this week, so lots of big sporting events, and those were the numbers we saw out of wrestling. Do you have any impressions on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting. I think NXT was up against tougher sports competition than Dynamite was. Tuesday was a tougher night than Wednesday was. The card wasn't stacked. It was, a developmental show, the C show against the A show from AEW. And again, NXT was against tougher competition, more of it. And still, NXT came out on top. And I think that's, look, in the big scheme of things, there wasn't enough separation in those numbers to be really significant, but it is a trend. This is like the third time now we've seen it. And I think you're going to see more and more of it. The simple fact is NXT is getting better and better, and its audience is growing. And AEW's, as I've said here for the last 2 years, is simply not. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I think part of me is only interested in it, in the ratings, insofar as so much social media nonsense and people making excuse. Last week it was, but WWE stacked the deck, and they did. They had reasons to do it, and they did it, and it obviously worked really well. And now it's, what excuse do we have? What's the excuse du jour, given that NXT had tougher competition, a typical card, typical roster?
Well, it wasn't. I'm not meaning to push back. It wasn't a typical show. It was one of their premium shows. It was the Halloween Havoc show that they did.
Okay, it was themed, but it was still.
Well, they had pay-per-view caliber matchups on it. I have no issue with that. I think that's great. You should have pay-per-view caliber matchups on your TV if you can afford them. But yeah, it was not your typical just here's a random episode of NXT, if that makes any sense.
Well, because there should not be a random episode.
I agree.
Of anything.
I agree totally.
They should be story-driven, thematically, if possible, driven. It should be, highly promotable stuff. That's what a television show should be. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be just a random show that we throw together and throw some names out there. Yep. And I think that's what we're seeing, unfortunately, too often. Ric Flair made his appearance. Now, it wasn't advertised, it wasn't promoted, and I don't think anybody should suggest or interpret the fact that Rick didn't have a big impact, because it was a surprise. And I think it was well done. Well, I love surprises. I think not promoting Rick was the right thing to do. We'll see next week. Now that Rick has been established, everybody knows that he's there. Next week, I think we're going to get an indication as to how much, added value that Ric Flair brings, to Dynamite. But I'm just going to be. It's just fun to watch. I love the competition, and I think more than anything, I'm just interested in the psychology of the wackadoos that are on social media, staking out their positions. I think that's more entertaining than the shows, actually.
Yeah, the demos were down across both shows, I would guess, due to them going against heavy sports competition, there being a good amount of crossover with those audiences. NXT did slightly edge out NXT, or AEW rather, did slightly edge out NXT in the demo, but not by much, 0.24 to 0.21. There is an interesting point you bring up there. NXT, really the main match they had that did have crossover from the main roster was, of course, Becky Lynch, where she did lose the NXT Women's Championship. I thought Becky Lynch did such a fantastic job in this NXT Championship run she had. I think she added a lot of equity to the NXT brand, and that's exactly what you should be looking for with these crossovers from the main roster. But I do want to bring up something that caught my eye about this. I feel like NXT is really, really, really building future right now. That's huge. They're really trying to invest a lot of stock into these younger talents to make them people that the audience wants to tune in and watch every single week. Whereas I look at AEW right now. You mentioned Ric Flair. They just brought in Adam Copeland. Christian Cage is one of the featured guys. Chris Jericho is one of the featured guys in their top storylines right now. Two very different approaches, Eric. in showcasing talent on your shows, where much older talent on one and much younger on the other. And that's a pretty interesting shift I feel like we've seen in the last 3-4 months or so.
Yeah, and I've read some of the garbage on social media, especially from shit stains like Dave Meltzer, who's complaining a lot about the fact that AEW has too many older talents. It's not that the older talents aren't valuable; it's how you use older
Absolutely.
talent.
Definitely.
And I think if there's a criticism to be made or point to be made, it's not whether Sting and now Ric Flair or Christian or Chris Jericho or Adam Copeland are too old. I don't even like to call them older. They are older than a lot of the younger talent, obviously, on the roster, but they also have a lot more value if they're used correctly. Now, I didn't watch the Ric Flair segment in its entirety. I watched a little bit of it. I'll probably have some time to check into it today. But from what I've heard from people who did watch it, is Christian came out and basically just ran him into the dirt.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's the smartest way to introduce someone like Ric Flair, a legitimate legend and somebody that is well. Rick is probably more well known nationwide now than he was at the peak of his career. Certainly, Rick was very, very popular with the wrestling audience, but Rick has transcended now the wrestling audience and is a legitimate celebrity outside of the world of wrestling. And to bring someone like that in with the legacy that Rick has and just shit on him and degrade him basically. Now, if there's a story there, if there's going to be if Rick's going to get his comeback and it gets interesting and I leave the door open for that possibility, then I may not agree with that strategy, but at least I can understand it. If it doesn't go anywhere and Rick doesn't get an opportunity to shine and have his moment at the end of the story, I'll be really disappointed for Rick. But again, it's how do you use a guy like Ric Flair? How are you setting up Sting's retirement? I think you asked me last week, do I think it'll have an impact on the ratings? My answer was, I think it could, but we have to wait and see how it's done. And if it's not done well, if it's not done correctly, if the psychology isn't right, if it's not nuanced carefully, then it's just going to be another match and it won't really reach the potential that it has. So we'll see. We just have to sit back and wait and see and hope that they come up with something creatively really good that really showcases some of this established talent that has the equity that a lot of that younger talent doesn't have. You talked about Becky Lynch and how, Becky's been utilized in NXT. Great story, showcases Becky. It didn't take anything away from Becky, but it allowed Becky to share some of her value and equity and raise the level of the talent that she was working with. That's how you use talent correctly, established talent when you're working with younger talent. Just throwing them out there for the sake of throwing them out there is not going to get you to where you want to be. Yeah. It's a waste of great talent.
And historically, I think AEW has done a good job with their legends. I think that was one of the biggest things that Tony Khan was emphasizing at first, because there were a lot of WWE legends who left the company because they felt like they weren't being treated well. Mark Henry, Paul White, those types.
And how John, not to push back, I'll steal your phrase.
Sure.
How have they used Mark Henry in AEW? How have they used Paul
I'm
White
not talking about those two specifically, because I don't think those two have, but I will give other examples. I think Sting, to this point, has been used fantastically and has aided a ton to Darby Allin. I think Matt Hardy has been utilized well, and with Private Party and Isaiah Cassidy has improved tenfold as a character, as a wrestler. I think Chris Jericho has given a rub to a lot of different talents. Sammy Guevara, Daniel Garcia. There have been a lot of people who have learned from.
I agree on Chris Jericho. Absolutely.
So there are a lot of examples. That's not to say every example is perfect, but I think there have been some good ones. So when I bring this up about what they're doing right now, I am surprised by it because it feels like it's a shift away from focusing on utilizing those legends, those established stars to enhance younger guys. And instead we're putting the emphasis on them to drive the stories. And that's not to say they're not capable of it. We know Adam Copeland is a top tier performer. Christian Cage, you could argue, is doing the best work of his career right now. I find it fascinating because historically speaking, AEW's focus has been on talent in different arenas. And now, as maybe we've seen some viewership dips and we've seen some live attendance dips, we're relying on some more established, prominent Hall of Fame caliber names to see if that's going to make a difference. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Sure.
That's what I find very fascinating. And if we're juxtaposing it to NXT, where now more than ever there's an emphasis on truly building and building and building the stars of tomorrow, it's just an interesting dichotomy as far as I see it. And
Yeah, and again, NXT is developmental talent. This is not their A show.
Yeah.
There are very few main roster stars that spend time on NXT. And when they do, it's to build the talent and get some interest in the show, obviously. But people have to keep in mind when they're battling over these issues on social media between NXT and Dynamite, you have to remind yourself it's the junior varsity competing against a college team.
Yeah.
And the fact that the JV team is outperforming your college team is pretty interesting to me.
yeah. AEW did, by the way, announce a pay-per-view this week as well. That's going to be in December. It's going to be called World's End, and it's going to be on Saturday, December 30th from the Nassau Coliseum. It's going to be AEW's 8th pay-per-view of the year, and it's going to follow the previous day's Ring of Honor pay-per-view, which is going to be final, or actually, sorry, not previous, 2 weeks prior, Final Battle, which will be at the Hammerstein Ballroom. So returning to that, the report as of now indicates that that pay-per-view is going to be exclusively on Honor Club, whereas this AEW pay-per-view will be a traditional pay-per-view as things currently stand. December 30th, Eric, unique time to run a pay-per-view event, especially with all the college football bowl games. We're talking the New Year's Six bowl games there. Some pretty stiff competition. You have any thoughts on that?
It's a tough time. It's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. First of all, AEW's success in terms of ticket sales for big venues, aside from Wembley, but here domestically in the United States, has not been a pretty picture. So Nassau Coliseum is a big building. I'll be really interested to see how well they do with tickets in that building. It was an interesting choice. But as far as the time of year goes, it's tough, man. There's so much going on. You're coming right off of Christmas. The economy is not good. People spend a lot of money over the holidays between travel and obviously, purchasing gifts and all the things that go along with the holidays. And then you've got New Year's Eve right there coming up. And it's just and all the competition that's available. So it's going to be an interesting experiment. And, this is now their 8th pay-per-view, I believe.
Yes, 8th pay-per-view.
And I'm really fascinated with what impact that's going to have on the AEW television product, because I was the first one to do it. I went from 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 in a very short period of time. And I did it because that was the only real revenue stream that I had 100% control of. And I needed to make the money for WCW. My mandate from above was to turn this thing around and make it profitable, or we're going to pull the plug. And the only thing I could do is increase the number of pay-per-views. And subsequently, WWE followed in that path and started doing the same thing I was doing. But that also puts more pressure on your television, because a pay-per-view, when you only have 4 of them a year, they're an event all by in and of itself.
Right.
The fact that you're doing a pay-per-view makes it an event, and you don't have quite as much pressure on your storylines and your arcs and your character evolutions within those arcs. You're simply putting on a big event, and people get excited about the prospect to a degree. But as you add more pay-per-views, it becomes increasingly difficult when you don't have disciplined, structured story and build and arcs leading to those pay-per-views. If your stories are random and inconsistent, and they're not structured properly, and they're not building to a crescendo right around that time of that pay-per-view, and you're adding more and more pay-per-views, you're going to see an impact on the television show. The question is whether or not it's going to be a positive evolution of the creative for television, or if it's going to be the same kind of random kind of storytelling that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
See, maybe
I'm
maybe this
interested-
pressure will force them to start thinking differently about how they approach story and creative.
I'm interested in what attendance figures we see as they add more pay-per-views. We know live attendance has generally been down for AEW. Historically, when they were running just the 4 pay-per-views a year, they really always did very well with the live gates and the attendance because people would travel to them. They were destination events. If you're an AEW fan and you know AEW is only running 4 pay-per-views a year, you want to be part of them. They felt like big premium events. Now, as you add more, is there going to be that demand from the fan base to be willing to travel to as many of these? WWE, when they're running all of these extra premium live events, the backlashes, the judgment days, those periphery, the B pay-per-views, if you will, a lot of those are centered in on attracting the local market to come out. They're not getting the international travel or even the national travel that you would get with a WrestleMania or a Royal Rumble. Whereas with those B shows, you're looking at the local markets. And AEW hasn't had a lot of success lately with the local market. So I am curious if you see less travel from fans and how that affects the capacity.
Look, the new car smell has worn off, right? When AEW first hit, and again, I've talked about this before. The premiere episode of Dynamite I watched in the writers' room in WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, along with several other writers and a couple of producers. And I was excited because I knew that competition makes everything better. So I was very optimistic, like a lot of fans were. When AEW announced Arthur Ashe, I went online and just, jumped in with both feet supporting it. Because again, it felt like there was momentum. It felt like there was going to be this competition and excitement surrounding it that would put pressure on WWE, which I knew would be a great thing ultimately for everybody. But over the last couple of years, I think that new car smell has worn off. I think the fans' willingness to kind of forgive some of the things that consciously or subconsciously they know were flaws, because they're growing and it's a new company and we're still so excited about competition and an alternative. All that is worn off. And now I think by adding pay-per-views, you're definitely going to see less of that segment of the audience that is compelled to attend that event because it's an event. AEW is doing a big show and you're part of this emerging new wrestling company and wanting to support it. I think that's oh my gosh, I just lost my light. I think we've lost a lot of that momentum and goodwill, and you're hearing and seeing a lot more critique of the AEW product, and you're also seeing a significant loss of live gate, consistent now in most markets. You look at AEW's TV shows, and they're producing their shows, and they may be 10,000 seat arenas, but they're scaled for 4,000 seats. It's not a good sign. That doesn't tell me that the live audience are really enjoying the product to the extent that they were 2 years ago when it was the new kid in town.
We will see as they head over to the New York market for that pay-per-view. Meanwhile,
That should be a good market for them. New York is a great market. I mean, there's so many wrestling fans in that market. Just generationally, there are fans. I mean, I did a signing in Queens. I think it was in Queens last weekend. I was there, and just the people that came out were, fathers and sons and nephews, and it's just so many wrestling fans. So they should do well. I think if they don't, it's probably has as much to do with the time of year, as it does with some of the other challenges that
Nassau Coliseum is a pain in the ass to get to as well. Oh, it is all the way out.
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with the area.
Goodness, it's all the way out on the island. Long Island traffic, some of the worst in the country, so it is a pain in the ass to get there. But there's not really a ton of active events going on there because the Islanders don't play there anymore, and there's no one really actively using it as its occupant. So they'll get a chance to break that in for their first AEW event there, I'm pretty sure. And historically, that has been WWE territory. That's where SummerSlam 2002 happened, where Brock Lesnar beat The Rock for the Undisputed Championship. So we'll see. There's definitely a market there for wrestling fans. It's just a matter of will they come out at that time of the year. I totally agree with you, especially with all those bowl games and stuff. I mean, that is a hot time of the year for TV viewing. Simultaneously, speaking of live events, Eric, WWE announced this week that Bash in Berlin, the first ever major WWE premium live event, will be held in Germany, emanating from the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Berlin on Saturday, August 31st, 2024, so not all that long after SummerSlam next year. The arena holds about 17,000. I'm sure it'll be scaled down just a tiny bit for all the sets and everything, but WWE continuing the emphasis on international expansion that we've been seeing ever since Nick Khan really came into the fold. What do you think about that?
And I think I heard yesterday that they've already sold 10,000 tickets in advance. And this is a live event. This is not a pay-per-view.
No, it is. It's a pay-per-view. It's a premium.
Oh, it is the
event.
pay-per-view.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
I stand corrected.
Yep.
But they've already sold, from what I've read. I don't know this is a fact. Haven't verified it. 10,000 tickets. If that's true, this will be a sellout. And it speaks to a pent-up demand, right? My experience, and again, things have probably changed a lot, but UK fans, you could always count on the UK. Fans in Germany were a little bit different. They were a little harder to do as well in Germany as we could do in the UK, even for WWE. But times have changed. And one of the challenges with German TV, in my experience back then, was that each region of Germany, maybe they call them states, I can't remember anymore, but each region in Germany has its own rules and regulations regarding violence on television. And that was always one of the big issues for WCW even when we had our show on a pretty substantial network, I think it was called DS1, perhaps, we had to edit the hell out of it because things you could get away with here in the United States in terms of, chair shots and things like that, which are not an issue as much anymore. But by way of an example, we had to be really careful with how we edited it. In fact, we didn't edit it. It was edited in Germany. And sometimes they edited it so heavily that you lost any semblance of continuity in the show. And each state was a little bit different. So it was tougher. You didn't have one product that was out there driving story and driving the audience. You had one product that was edited several different ways, depending on what part of Germany it was being, televised in. And it really and it was also late at night because Germany at the time, again, want to acknowledge that things may have changed, but back then wrestling was pretty much a late night property because of the violence issue. You could have full frontal nudity and sex was fine. The Germans looked at things a lot differently in terms of what was suitable for a television audience and a viewing audience. Whereas, full frontal nudity in prime time, no issues. But violence, that had to be late night programming. Just almost the opposite of what it is here in the United States or what it was in the United States. That was another big issue. So we'll see, now that, people have access to the internet streaming platforms and they can now watch things that don't have to be chopped up and edited. Perhaps it's going to create a better opportunity in Germany than up until this point, or at least when I was producing and distributing, we had back then. It's going to be fascinating. It's always fun. I love to watch the business of the wrestling business far more than I like watching what's going on inside of the ring. And I find it to be really interesting to see how things change.
We got a lot of exciting things to look forward to here coming up in the next few months, including at WrestleCade. This is one of my favorite events that goes down every single year in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. 3 days of family-friendly wrestling fun with generations of pro wrestlers and sports entertainers abound. You're going to find more than 125 of your favorite wrestling stars from all eras, including Eric Bischoff. I'll be there as well. November 24th through the 26th at the Benton Convention Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The Ad-Free Shows team is going to be represented in full there, including a live show, The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, the other podcast I host. Eric will be in attendance signing autographs. I'll be there on stage with Matt Hardy. Jeff Hardy's going to be doing a concert after the Hardy Boys wrestle. Arn Anderson's going to be there. Jake the Snake Roberts is going to be there. Lex Luger's going to be there. It is going to be a fantastic time. WrestleCade.com is where you want to get your tickets now. Do not miss out on WrestleCade. I don't think there's any better indicator of how hot WWE is right now as a property as seeing the international success they have had with Gates overseas. I think that is such a massive reflection of how the brand has improved across the globe and the access that the company has across the globe with Money in the Bank. We saw Clash at the Castle. Now you get a show like this. We know they're going down to Australia. They have the 2 Saudi Arabia shows every year.
Hey,
I think
when is the next Saudi Arabia show? Do you know?
it's coming up. It's like imminent. It's let's see. It is. I want to get you the exact date because it apparently will be Roman Reigns' last. Is November 4th, so it's next week. It is apparently
Wow.
Roman Reigns' last defense of the championship until the Royal Rumble, should he retain there against LA Knight. So
It's going to be interesting. That's another fascinating story that I'm going to really keep an eye on, because with everything going on in the Middle East, I mean, literally last night we were all eating dinner and I, have my phone next to me and I'm watching the news, because I think what's going on right now in the Middle East is this is as close to a World War III scenario as we've seen since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis as a kid. I remember having, air raid drills and having to hide under our desks and stay
Duck and
away from
cover.
windows and all the things that we were doing as kids on a regular basis, by the way, because of just the tension in the Cold War. I think what we're seeing now, and as recently as last night, while everybody's talking and having fun and drinking wine, I'm looking at the news. I'm going, oh, okay, we've got 900 ground troops now, boots on the ground, heading to Israel. And woke up this morning and, we're dropping bombs in Syria. And all of a sudden, we're far more involved than I think anybody wanted us to be. And it's only going to escalate over time. It's going to be interesting to see if there's any impact on that Saudi Arabia show as a result of what's going on. Because a lot can happen between now and November 4th.
yeah, you're not wrong about that. John Cena is going to be wrestling on that show. That was just announced today as we record this, him and Solo Sikoa. John Cena, Eric, has not won a singles match in WWE since 2018. How crazy is that?
And he's probably having more fun now
Yeah.
than he had before 2018.
Yeah.
I get the sense, just from the little bit that I've watched John recently, that he's just having a blast. And it just makes me so happy to see that. That's what you hope for when you see a guy like John Cena or Ric Flair or anybody. You want to see them go out there and just enjoy it and have fun doing it.
Well,
And they
with
don't
the
have to worry
SAG-AFTRA strike, Eric, I don't think he expected to have a run like this. I think this is all bonus and gravy for him.
And he's having fun doing it. It gets him back to the beginning. It brings him back to where it all started. And I just think it's cool as hell.
Yeah, and that strike doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. So who knows how much longer they'll have him for. Speaking of Cena, as we take this, Fightful just dropped this report. I think you'll find this interesting. Fightful, Sean Ross Sapp reporting Cody Rhodes continues to be a standout on WWE programming and is over at the merchandise table as well. In a rarity, Fightful Select learned and subsequently confirmed within WWE that Cody Rhodes was able to outsell generic WWE merchandise at some of the recent live events. This doesn't occur often, as generic merchandise generally includes basic WWE logo shirts, event merchandise, and title belts. Cody Rhodes does great sales with weight belts, which are a high-ticket item as well, but has had great success with merchandise since his return in 2022. We're told that as of late, John Cena has beaten Cody a couple of times, but generally, it's Rhodes, Cena, or generic WWE merchandise topping the list. Is he not the guy? He's the guy. He's the guy.
It's awesome.
Should have won, man. Should have won at WrestleMania. I'm sorry. I am not coming off that hill.
WrestleMania is going to be here in about 20 minutes. And if Cody comes out on top and completes the journey and moves on to his next journey, there's plenty of time to sell a lot. All that is an indication that the audience wants it.
Yeah.
The audience wants it as bad for Cody as Cody wants it. And that's the perfect scenario.
Yeah.
Making the audience want to see Cody become champion and complete his journey that's the magic. That's the nuanced art of creative. And, I hate to call it booking because it's not really booking anymore, but That's the art in creating that emotion, creating that desire, and making a character so compelling that the audience is just gnashing their teeth,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to see him complete that journey or her. That's the magic. And like I said, WrestleMania will be here in about 20 minutes. So we got plenty of time, brother.
When you're in town for that, I'll take you some good spots in Philly. We'll make sure we have a good time there. It'll be great.
I ain't going near Philly. I'm not going near Philly.
Good.
I won't even take a booking or an appearance if I'm asked to do it. Not even doing it. It's too much for me, man. Maybe I've been living in Wyoming too long, but I don't mind dipping my toe in the water. And I had fun in New York, because it was in and out. Flew in on a Friday night, got in around midnight, worked all day Saturday into Saturday evening, and I was out 7:00 Sunday morning. I don't mind that, but man, it is so busy and jammed. WrestleMania is such a massive event. I feel the same way about Super Bowls. If somebody gave me, 2 tickets for Lori and I and a free flight to go to a Super Bowl, I would say thank you and maybe give it to somebody that really cares, because I just sit home and watch it on television. I'm not big around. I don't like big crowds and congested areas. So I appreciate the offer to show me around Philly, but I'm going to take a hard
I was
pass.
just going to take you to a good sushi spot where you were going to buy me dinner, because you still owe me that, by the way.
I still owe you dinner, but it's not going to happen in Philadelphia.
Okay, gotcha. We do have a couple more quick things. I want to ask you about this, and we'll finish on a WWE topic, but TNA's back, baby. The TNA brand name is returning. They announced, Impact Wrestling announced at Bound for Glory this past weekend that the company would be rebranding once again as TNA Wrestling in the beginning of 2024. And it was an interesting response from the peanut gallery. I think a lot of people got caught up in the nostalgia and thought, hey, that's cool. They associated with 05, 06 TNA was that cool, hip alternative product. But Eric, there are also a lot of people who associate TNA with quite a bit of stink. And to see the brand return here after the Impact brand was put in place in the first place to get away from the TNA name, man, it just seems like there's a lot of moving pieces here. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, not really. I understand. I can understand why they did it. I certainly haven't talked to anybody about it. There is an argument to be made. I'm not sure I buy into it 100% in this particular case, but there is an argument to be made that tapping into nostalgia is a good thing. But let's be honest here, not wanting to offend anybody or hurt anybody's feelings, but TNA was always a pimple on a pig's ass. It had a very small, loyal, but small, relatively speaking, market share in terms of television. It was never a big property. It was an emerging property, and it was exciting for a while because it was new and there was a new car smell and all the same things that we're seeing with Dynamite, or AEW, I should say. But I just don't think that TNA brand had enough value ever so that bringing it back is going to have any kind of, no pun intended, impact. I think it's interesting and it gets people excited. There'll be some chatter on social media. Which is a buzz. It's another way of saying buzz. There'll be some buzz, but unless the product changes and there's a significant change in presentation to coincide with the rebranding, it's just changing the name of the show. And I don't think that that's really going to matter one bit. Again, there wasn't enough value in the TNA brand to begin with. And it's still TNA. And you can, oh yeah, but it means total non-stop. It meant tits and ass. It was a Vince Russo idea. And as time went on, it was like, well, we got to tone down the, can't have, girls dancing in cages and stupid shit. We got to tone it down. And it was like, oh, it's total nonstop action. Well, okay, I guess. But like I said, there was just never enough value to begin with to expect that bringing it back is going to have any kind of significant impact on the property.
Funniest thing is, Eric,
I hope I'm wrong.
I think, I know Impact Wrestling right now is not really on your radar, but I think if it was, you'd find it to be probably the most compelling wrestling program on TV. They really,
you know what, John, it may be, but if no one's watching it,
no, I totally agree. I get it.
How many people are watching it?
Yeah.
300, 200,000
Yeah.
people on an episode consistently. That's, I could do a YouTube show
Yeah.
of me cooking a fucking steak and do that many views. It's just not,
Yeah.
nobody's watching. It'd be fantastic property. And that's what I mean about presentation. Presentation also includes where do you see it?
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's a tree that falls in a forest and nobody hears it or sees it. And that's what impact is, regardless of the talent, the roster, how good the show is put together creatively. It's got to look and feel significant in order to expect to see any kind of uptick
Yeah.
in audience reaction.
Yep. No, I was just saying, I think it's interesting that what is generally considered to be a very good show just doesn't have the reach. It doesn't have the access that some other promotions do have. I mean, we just saw NWA of all promotions just allegedly inked a deal with CW affiliates. So that's where NWA, which it just cracked me up because you and I spent so much time analyzing the live golf stuff with the CW. And I'm curious to see, we don't know the time slot yet or the day. What kind of interest is there with NWA? And if it's going to be a sort of syndicated program where there's a different time slot in each market, or if it's going to be a universal time slot, let's see what the appetite is for that. Because I don't know if it's full discussion worthy at this moment in time, but it could be interesting to follow. The last thing, Eric, that I want to talk about here with you was a pretty significant story that emerged this week. We know the TKO stock hasn't been electric since the merger went down. But the report from the Hollywood Reporter this week indicates, and I'm going to read it verbatim here, Endeavor, the owner of WME IMG and a majority stake in TKO Group, is going to test the market and is considering going private. The company said Wednesday that it is initiating, quote, a formal review to evaluate strategic alternatives for the company, end quote. Endeavor adds that it is not considering a sale of its stake in TKO, which owns and operates the UFC and WWE. Private equity firm Silver Lake, a major shareholder in the company with 71% of Endeavor's voting power, added, quote, Silver Lake is committed to strategies that deliver value for all shareholders to Endeavor. To that end, Silver Lake is currently working towards making a proposal to take Endeavor private. And they also, Eric, reiterated they do not plan on selling off assets here.
So let me ask you, John, because I don't know if TKO, which controls UFC and WWE, is not a part of this. What does Endeavor own? What assets within Endeavor, excluding WWE and UFC, are a part of the Endeavor group? Because I don't know.
Well, so you have the WME agency, which is, that's the William Morris agency, and Endeavor. They merged, and that became part of the Endeavor Holdings company. I mean, WME is a massive.
They used to represent me. I'm pretty familiar with them.
Right. No, I'm saying not to you. I'm saying to our listeners there who may not be familiar. So that, to my knowledge, that is their primary business stake that they have. And then you have the different subsidiaries that they hold, which is UFC. I'm looking right now, 16 over 90, which is a global creative agency as well. And
so this is an agency play. This is similar to what CAA did.
Yeah, very similar to CAA. Yes, absolutely. They have Learfield, which is another streaming service that I used to do some work for, actually, that they promote broadcasts on like ESPN and Fox Sports. They have the NCSA College Recruiting Company, Miss Universe they own. So they have their feet in a bunch of different ponds.
So I wonder, and again, this is just me not knowing this world and spending time researching it, but I wonder, this isn't a significant move as it relates to WWE and UFC. It's a non-issue. It really isn't even interesting to me or to us. If we're talking about the wrestling business or the business of the wrestling business, it's kind of an insignificant news item in that sense, isn't it? If it's not going to affect, they're not a part of this public-private play, who cares? It's just
so long as
business.
They're true to their word on that. I mean, them saying that we don't have interest at this time in selling them, that's not a guarantee that it wouldn't happen. But I would be very surprised if it did. And I'd also be surprised with the legality of that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know it, but being able to pawn off an asset that you had just merged and acquired, there's got to be some sort of legality with that. I'd have to imagine.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's I don't know. I just found it interesting. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces. I mean, there was even a report this week, Eric, that Warner Brothers Discovery might be up for sale very soon, and NBC Universal and Comcast are very interested in a potential acquisition there. So
yeah, I had a conversation with Bill Shaw. Bill Shaw was the guy that promoted me to executive producer, and I think senior vice president at one point. Bill is still in touch with the Ted Turner family. Ted doesn't really communicate a lot anymore. He's a type of dementia, so there's not a lot of direct communication with Ted. Although Bill is going to Ted's 85th birthday party in November, which I found really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But I was talking to Bill about everything that's been going on. And Bill's still very much in touch with a lot of the top executives in Turner Broadcasting. But CNN, is moving out of Atlanta, and Bill's comment was it's moving to New York. And Bill's of the opinion, based on the conversations he's had with people that know, that CNN's going to be for sale. Don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like the Warner Discovery thing was all about crushing costs, expenses, making it easier to spin off assets. It may not even be around 2 years from now or 3 years from now. You just don't know, because television is such a volatile environment, business wise. It's anything can happen right now. I mean, it's day to day.
Can you imagine, after all that time we spent talking about Warner Bros. Discovery, and then all the WWE rights conversations and the sale and the merger, the acquisition, if Comcast, which at this current time has licensing agreements with WWE, were to swallow up Warner Brothers Discovery, which has licensing with AEW and potentially even more? What a weird, wild turn of events that would be in such a short period of time.
Yeah, nothing surprises me anymore, John, when it comes to media. What was once a pretty stable business and an exciting business is now really the wild, wild west of, garage sales. It's crazy.
For sure. Good stuff here, Eric Bischoff. We covered a lot of ground on this episode. Great interview as well. Anything you want to throw out there as we wrap up here?
No, man, it's fun to get back in the saddle again. Looking forward to doing next week's show. There's a rumor that Justin Barrasso from Sports Illustrated may be with us. We don't know. We haven't
lock it down.
inked the deal yet. We'll have a contract signing soon, and we'll keep you informed on social media. But looking forward to getting settled in and cranking out some great shit.
No doubt. Trying to lock that down with Justin. If you're listening, Justin, text me back so we can lock that shit down. But I want to lock down some advertisers here on Strictly Business as well. And you can do that by heading on over to advertisewitheric.com. Get your business out in front of thousands of listeners and viewers every single week here on Strictly Business. This is one of the biggest podcast feeds in the world for professional wrestling, and we want to get your product out in front of it. Should be a lot of fun coming up here over the course of the next few weeks. We've got WrestleCade coming up. I know you guys over on the ad-free show side have some plans for Tampa for the Royal Rumble, so there's going to be a lot of good things going down here. Anything else you would like to say to our Strictly Business faithful, Eric?
Now have a great week. How's that? Enjoy your weekend. It's Friday. The show will probably be posting late Friday, so dig in and have a great weekend and a great week next week. We'll see you then.
I agree with you there, Eric Bischoff. This has been Strictly Business Week. We'll see you next time.